I just want to share that for me, the book was so personal. And I wondered two things. One is, if you can share with us why you chose to write your personal story. And then I want to invite you to read any passage that you would like from that, and then you'll get to ask a question.
Actually, I think the best response to your question on why I chose to write this book, and I think it's a question that comes up a lot, and it is a question I ask it myself a lot. Why are we writing this? And it's something that anyone who ever writes a book, I think, should ask themselves why they're writing a book, because I'm actually a big believer that there are a lot of books in the world, and I think we should focus on what is our stories and what are the parts that matter most. But I think the best way to answer that would be to also hear from, and I'm going to stick to 3 people, I promise, of why you were here. I think by thinking of what brought people here tonight, I think that's going to answer the question a bit, then I will take some time, obviously, to answer the question from my perspective. But why are you here?
We have mics.
I hear that it's not the best weather that Palo Alto has to offer. Though compared to the weather that I come from in New York, this is like literally summer, and it's amazing. But what brought you here tonight? And I mean that there's no right or wrong answer. It could be anything from someone forced you to come, you were here for your job, you had a crying baby at home, and coming here seemed like a better idea, to something more personal. But is there anyone who feels comfortable sharing why they're here tonight? Yes.
You just have to give it back to me.
Let's try to keep it brief, because otherwise Faye is going to get really angry.
I'll try to make it brief, but it's going to be impossible. I'm so sorry. So I'm a Muslim. I was raised in circumstances almost like yours, in a very, very religious family, and my family is from the descendant of Prophet Muhammad.
And I actually, it's a weird story that I haven't had a chance to tell yet, but I actually learned that I'm actually related to him also. We're going to talk about that another time.
I love you even more. But, and I went to Yeshiva, and I used to give lecture in mosque and all that kind of stuff, but now I married a Jew. And I don't have all the answers, and I am so confused right now. And I came here to hope that maybe I will find solace knowing that life is very confusing. If you can do it, I can do this too.
Reason number 1, why I wrote the book. You see, I think I don't have to guess. I should just let everyone answer your question.
All right, you got magic number 3.
Yeah, but that is a big reason, and we'll get to talk a bit more about it. Yes.
We need a mic.
Can you speak loud?
I think we can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, you can speak loud. I will repeat it if people can't hear it.
So I came because as another transgender woman that I've been working for 40 years as an engineer in a defense company, very conservative. And I recently come out and getting ready to retire. And so I'm wanting to share my story because it's, being transgender is a beautiful gift.
Yes.
And I want people to know that and understand it and believe it, to change the story that being trans is not a curse. It is a wonderful gift.
Amazing.
And I wanted to hear your story and become inspired by you, and maybe get some tips on how to do it.
So we got reason number 2.
Thank you.
One more.
Hello. I have been blessed to be the mother of a gender non-conforming daughter who still identifies as a girl. But what I have learned in the journey so far is that we all lose so much when we are in these gender binaries. And I have learned so much from a very courageous young person who from the age of 3 knew who she was. And so I'm just here to learn more.
Thank you so much. And I assume we can continue to do that, but these were legitimately one of the major reasons that pushed me to actually start writing it. Now, there's obviously the part, and I remember talking with the editor, like the first phone call that we ever had, and she's actually here, which is like the first time I actually get to present when she was sitting here, but the first phone call we had, and that came up a bit, like what is this story, that the parts of the story that haven't been told before? And I think that is, when I was sitting with myself and thinking about that, and there are a lot of stories written by transgender people, not enough, and far from the diversity that we need, but there have been told some stories. There have been a handful of stories told by people who grew up in the Ultra-Orthodox community, and maybe a bit more stories from people who grew up in fundamentalist religious communities. But what I've learned is, first and foremost, is all these stories, whether it's religion, whether it's gender, that need to be told more. And statistically, just to give an example, and whenever there's a survey done, it shows that people who know personally or know the stories of LGBTQ people tend to be a lot more supportive. It's very easy to hate an idea, it's not easy to hate a person. When you know someone, when we tell the story, it's more than just telling a really important story that has to be told for the sake of this is a story that has to be told. By telling it, we're also committing an act of activism. We're doing something that really helps the narrative and helps people getting to the point of starting to celebrate our community, which is what I want to get to in a minute. But I think specifically for me, the thing that I have found that even the LGBTQ community, there isn't enough discussion on the impact that religion has. I think in a policy perspective, yes, but a lot of times people try not to focus too much on the impact of growing up in fundamentalist communities and what that means for LGBTQ people who grow up there. We talk a lot about the religious right, we talk a lot about the kind of religious restrictions that are being placed on other people. Very little about the people who grow up with these religious restrictions, people who their families sometimes, their parents, their grandparents are the ones who are trying to suppress so many other LGBTQ people and the impact that that has on them. And then specifically for me, this was legitimately a story that didn't exist out there. There was no one else who ever wrote about being, as far as I could tell, even trans and Orthodox, but specifically not trans and Ultra-Orthodox or having grown up Hasidic. And final part, and I described that in the introduction as well, the most important part that I have found is that stories that are being told about either the Hasidic community or the trans community tend to suffer from one of two major downfalls. They either exoticize, romanticize, or totally demonize. And I think you have that, whatever it's about trans people, and I found it specifically with trans women, you will get these very exotic sexual stories, or these stories that are all about victimhood with very little nuance, or you get these stories that are, oh, it's such a beautiful experience, which unfortunately I found like in the trans community doesn't exist enough, but it exists out there, without the focus on what's really going on, where it's both. There's exotic parts and there's ugly parts, there's beautiful parts, there's positive, there's negative, and with the Hasidic community it's even more so. They are both by people who are in the community, grew up in that community, and people have left. It's either a very exotic story or a very demonizing story. And I think a big part of writing this book was trying to capture the in between. Do you want me to read now?
I have a follow-up question now that we've gotten so much input and you've given a beautiful answer.
I just want to say, like, I love that. I hate talking at people. I really hate it. I want to talk with people, not at people.
So here's the thing. One of the things that was so compelling, we talked about this earlier this evening, about the book, to me, was that you didn't demonize. You could have, and you didn't. And actually, when you read the book, I hope you all will read the book, the characters are real, they're dimensional, you get a real sense for your family, for your parents, for your siblings, for your whole community. They've come across as real human beings, and yet you had a traumatic set of experiences. So I wonder if you could, before you read, or maybe in addition, I clearly cannot boss you around.
You should talk to my parents, they tried really hard and failed.
But before you read, or maybe in addition to it, if you could say a little bit more for people who haven't yet read the book, what it was like growing up. Like, what could you encapsulate that experience? It was not easy.
So here's the thing. Whenever people think, oh, how is it growing up with, like, for example, like, oh, I did that yesterday, I want to do that again. Can everyone raise your hand? I'm not going to make you swear, just raise your hand. I love doing that. Okay. If you're an only child, put down your hand. Okay. If you have 2 or less siblings, put down your hand. 3, 4 or less. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You have 11 siblings? Okay, that's a standard family. I have 12 siblings. Now, people ask me sometimes, oh, how is it growing up in such a big family? How is it growing up in a Hasidic community? And I'm like, hold on, you're asking me this question as if I have some points of references here to compare with. I only grew up, or the way I say it, I was only raised once. I don't know if I grew up. But I was only raised once, and I don't have any points of references. So let me just start out with that. Now, however, I do know a lot of what Israel. I do have friends, both friends who grew up Hasidic, friends who grew up secular, and everything in between. And I know what it is to grow up. So as far as I can tell, relatively, I had really amazing childhood. And what I mean by that, my parents are special people, and I think about, specifically my mom, I think of, she's an angel in every sense I can think of it, even in the context of the Hasidic community. Like, I think people are used to like a Hasidic like housewives and people who just like cook the whole time and like have babies all the time. But my mom does all of that plus. Like I don't ever remember her being busy or exhausted, which is extremely surprising because then I look on my married sisters and they can barely get their bearings together sometimes, which is kind of normal when you are like literally at any point of your life either nursing a baby or pregnant. But she somehow managed to make us all feel, I speak about it in the book, my parents speak to all of their kids every day, both of them. How many of you speak to your parents every day? Living parents? That with good relationships. Okay, amazing, but you can all tell. And I assume your mom doesn't have 12 kids, or 13 kids, which is an extremely, which I think is objectively a really positive experience. So obviously there was a lot of trauma, but I think one of the things that was really important to me to get in the book, I think as far, again, I can't tell that from my dad, and I don't want to go into, I think it's a whole other conversation, but at least with my mom, she really, there was a lot of trauma, but it wasn't her fault necessarily. It wasn't like, yes, I wish my mom would have taught me more about gender, more about sexuality, or listened to me. And there's a story in the book that I'm not going to tell because I want you to just go buy the book. But when I was 4 years old, and I did mention it to her, and I did do something physical, which I think if my mom would have been, even in the 90s, if she would have been exposed to the internet or to other things, she would have, regardless of accepting it, she would have at least known it. But I actually believe that she didn't know anything about it. Even my dad, when I came out to him, which is also described in the epilogue of the book, he had no idea what I'm talking about. So I think that is really important to point out, which is also why it was important for me to capture these parts, whatever it was, the food, the holidays, and everything else that is in the book. And yes, there was the trauma, there was, but I don't think there's, and I mentioned that to you when we had dinner, in the Talmud there's a concept of the Tinok Shenishva, which is someone who is being taken away as a young child and grows up without a religious education. And I think in a very big way, yes, there's a lot of things in my family, and so I'm not going to talk about the community. I think in the community there are unfortunately some things that I would consider malicious, but at least in my family, in my immediate family, they did what they believed, at least my mom, again, at least what she really believed that is best for us, as far as she knew. Now, obviously, yes, a lot of the things that she knew, a lot of things that the community has done, did have a really negative experience on me, and they were traumatizing. And I do believe that every community and parents everywhere should have at least the ability to listen to their kids. And the fact that I knew from a really young age that there are parts of myself that forget about expressing, that I can't even tell everyone, that is traumatic. That is something that I don't think a child anywhere should go through. And I think to some extent, a big part of my work over the past few years has been to change that. I joke, and I know there was a video, so I don't know, it could be some of by now, it could be some of you have heard that before, but I sometimes joke that my initial goal was to get the Hasidic community to be transphobic. Which sounds weird, but in a community where I didn't know that trans people existed until I started leaving the community, just for them knowing that that exists is a good thing. And I can say that 4 years later, it's mission accomplished. Like based on the feedback that I'm getting, and it's not necessarily positive, though there are some, like someone just shared today on there's a Hasidic online forum called Kavish Table, which translates to coffee room. And someone shared it, they put it on Facebook, and I used to be on it like 7, 8 years ago, but I haven't read a lot, but they shared it on Instagram and tagged me on Instagram. And you can look it up, I shared it on my Insta story. A review that someone wrote, and I can tell it's a Hasidic person based on the Yiddish, a Hasidic Yiddish review of the book that is extremely positive.
I was going to ask you if you think part of the audience for this book, in your mind when you wrote it, was the community that you came from, or is it a broader
The audience is everyone, and we'll get to that in a second because I don't want to forget what I was going to say right now.
Yeah.
I did know that some people in there are going to read it, but you've got to realize that a lot of people that don't speak any English, and a lot of people who do speak some English, still not enough to read a book. Which is, and even people who might be able to read a book if they really want to, it's not their go-to.
Have you thought about translating it into Yiddish?
Yeah, can I get back to
Yeah.
what I'm doing? Sorry. Which is that what I've learned and what I've seen from the response is that we've gotten to a point where this is a conversation that is happening. I know for a fact that right now, if there is a Hasidic child that is having the conversation with their mother that I had when I was 4 years old, unfortunately, I don't think we're at a point where the mother is going to be, oh, that is so nice, let's find a therapist that's going to be open to listen to this, which would be beautiful, but I don't think that's going to happen for the majority of them. But at least that it will give that mother or that parent pause for a second and be like, oh, okay, maybe this is something I should listen to, which is already a very important part. Now, can I read something and then we'll get back to your question?
Yes.
Great. Before I do start reading that, we're going to do the hand things again. And actually, we're going to do it twice now. I love that. Now, how many of you would say that you are LGBTQ tolerant? It is a trick question, so if you want to reconsider your answer, you can reconsider it. Actually, I don't like tolerance. I think, when I think about tolerance, it's like with me and lactose, where I'm lactose intolerant, you know? Or like nuts, or like, you know, or like, huh?
It's like I won't throw up.
Tolerance is like, you know, I don't know, I think in New York, in the political circle, you know, and specifically now when we talk, and I'm not going to talk politics, but we talk a lot about, you know, like rich people, like how much money and billionaires and everything, and I feel like sometimes, like, it's like something like, some people are like, I don't tolerate billionaires, and some people are like, maybe I tolerate them. It's like this conversation, when you say tolerance, you're usually referring to something that you don't necessarily agree with. It's like the reaction that I see when a teenager comes out to their parents, is like, hey, I think I'm gay, or lesbian, or trans, or non-binary, or whatever that is, and the parents are like, oh, we still love you. Which is beautiful, and I wish that was my father's reaction. My father's reaction was, I'm never going to talk to you again, which is obviously a lot worse. But tolerance is not a point. Tolerance is not where we have to be. Now, I'm going to guess that literally each and every one of you, I don't know where exactly you stand when it comes to the LGBTQ community, and maybe we'll get to talk a bit about that more, but I know that my parents would never walk into an event like this. I know that so many other people, so the reality that all of you are here is already saying so much that you're at least open to listen. Which is why I think the conversation that we need to have goes beyond tolerance. Yes, obviously, we don't want you to have intolerance, but tolerance is not what we're looking for. I want to try one other thing with the hands. How many of you had a bar mitzvah? A bar mitzvah? A bar mitzvah, not a bat mitzvah, a bar mitzvah. Okay, great. Now, how many of you had a bat mitzvah? How many of you had both? You gotta talk. Because usually, almost I have been doing that a bit lately, and I don't think I've ever had someone else who raised their hand other than someone that I helped do that. It's the most beautiful thing that I can think of. I had a bar mitzvah when I was 13, and then I had a bat mitzvah 3.5 years ago, which is the part that I want to read a bit about. Now, in this book, and we're in chapter 1, and it's right after the part that I'm not going to read, is the part where my dad was giving me my name, standing in a synagogue, holding me, or my grandfather was holding me, when I was, my bris was when I was, I think, 10 or 11 or 12 days old. I was a late bloomer, so to speak. You can read the book about that as well. But I want to continue from that scene on. My parents were happy. They finally had their boy. My father would soon have a son he could take to synagogue, a son to whom he could teach Torah and the family's customs. The family was finally feeling whole. I will give you some, I have 5 older sisters, so that is part of the context. In his wildest, worst dreams, he could not have imagined that one day, 20 years after he held his firstborn son, that child will build up the courage to tell him, I'm a woman. I always was. I always will be. My father did eventually have a firstborn son, but for that he would have to wait another year. My brother Hershey, his next child, was born in January 1993. As for me, that child who was mistakenly believed to be a boy, I was to live a life entirely driven by the roles and expectations of gender, some 24 years would pass before that same child stood in another synagogue, one her father would never consider to be kosher, to receive her new name. And let her name be known among Israel and this community and in all communities as Abigail Chava Bat Menachem Mendel V'Chaya Shendel, the rabbi announced. Abby. You see, I'd gone off the derech, off the path, to complete my self-determination, to live an authentic life. I would have to leave the community, the worst offense imaginable. I left Williamsburg to build a new life in Manhattan, 10 miles away, but it might as well have been another continent for all its differences. When I left the Hasidic community, Abby Stein turned to my mother. You see, she said, you promised God that you would wear black tights if your baby was healthy, but you broke your promise. Your baby's body might be healthy, but God took his soul. Soon after, my mother finally started wearing black tights, and she still does today. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. A lot happened in between. Now, the tight story is intentionally a teaser, and I didn't have to include that, and I'm not going to explain it. And if you want to know it, you got to buy the book. But yeah, I do think it's an important story that had to go in there because of the amount of pressure, the amount of like how much clothing actually means to my family. But for details, you can buy the book and read.
Thank you, Abby.
But the reason why I wanted to read this is specifically the second part of it, the part of the ability to actually stand in synagogue 3.5 years ago after coming out, a community that didn't tolerate me. A community where when I came out to the rabbi, he was like, so we're gonna do a kiddush, right? Like it was just a given, right? And when I was like gonna look and sit down to see what kind of rituals actually exist, there wasn't enough. There was some things that I found online, and the rest we just had to sit down and create ourselves. There's a video of it online. If you go to my YouTube channel, you will see it. And it has been an amazing moment to me. But ever since then, and specifically over the past few months, I've been thinking more and more on that as a message that we need. In Judaism, I don't know if all of you are Jewish, but I get the feeling that some of you might be. And given that we are sitting at a Jewish day school, I will allow myself to say that specifically in Judaism, we have a belief that every human being that is alive is worthy of celebration. When a baby is born, we celebrate that. I think one of the most beautiful parts of Jewish tradition and culture are the life cycle events. And that is the way I see when I imagine an ideal Jewish community when it comes to the LGBTQ community. It's a community where we don't do gay weddings, but weddings of people who happen to be gay. A community where when you come out, it's not, oh, I still love you, but this is amazing, let's go and have a party. Because that's what it is. And maybe we'll get to talk a bit more about it. But I really believe that it's a beautiful part for us and for our communities, for us to be able to live and be. They don't need to go get all inspirational on you all. We can go back and talk about mundane things.
Yeah. Thank you for reading that passage. It was a beautiful passage, and many of the passages in the book really are quite moving and stirring. I do want to go back to that question about the audience for the book, and if you have thought about having it translated into Yiddish.
So the audience of the book, which is something that I think comes out a bit in the intro as well, and I taught a lot about it. And to me, the audience of I say that sometimes about when I do tech studies, I always say that I want people, and I do a lot of them. I have over 40 source sheets online, and I think a lot about them as I want a person who grew up with the most intense Jewish education possible to still find it interesting, and at the same time, someone who doesn't know anything about Judaism whatsoever to still be able to understand what's going on. And I think the same about the LGBTQ community. I want that a person, a trans person who went through this on their own way, in their whatever that was, to still find it interesting. And also that people who have never interacted with trans people ever should still find it, should still know what's going on. And I think at the end of the day, a big part of this story is just the story of a girl growing up in New York City. And I know so much of it seems, so different that people can't relate to it. And I tell people a lot when I think about gender dynamics. Or think, for example, something that maybe comes out a bit, and I think I even got to talk a bit more about it, not in the book, but an essay that I wrote for a Glamour magazine 2 weeks ago, where I got to focus a bit more on the sexism, for example, in the Hasidic community. And I think people sometimes listen to it, they see the gender dynamics, and it's very easy to write it up, these radical communities. And I'm like, yes, okay. These radical communities have this idea that women are sexual objects and have no sexual agency, and men are not sexual objects who have sexual agency. And there's like, to give one simple example in the Hasidic community where it's like men are not allowed to watch women dance, women are allowed to watch men dance. And a lot of that comes from their understanding of gender, which is that men, if they're going to see a woman dance, they're going to get really turned on, and God forbid. And whose fault is it if that happens? The woman. Now, this is, to me, the way I see that is just one radical example of something that exists in the world as a whole. How many times do we actually blame women, and how often do we actually expect the woman to take responsibility for what other people are going to react to, the way they dress, to the way they talk, to the way they dance? And the same when we think about like housewives. Okay, yeah, so maybe we don't live in a world anymore where every woman is expected to have 13 kids. Fine. But we do live in a world where, on average, women, specifically, I think about politics again because it's where I actually have a day job, which includes public policy, and that's where women constantly get at a lot more than men, which is, like how do you balance family life and having a job, or like being in politics or whatever, when men get that question a lot less. Which is what I'm trying to get at is so many of these stories are just human stories.
No, I think that's right, but just to come back to, given that most of the people in Williamsburg can't read this book.
Have I thought of translating it to English?
Yiddish.
Yiddish, sorry. I definitely have thought about it. I've thought about Yiddish and Hebrew, which are the two languages that I really wanted to, but the two languages that are probably least likely to actually happen, because at least in terms of funding, there isn't much of a, like in Hebrew you will have so many Israelis just read in English. And I would love, maybe if someone wants to fund it, we can talk about it. It's something to talk about. And I would love to have it. And I think there's a better chance that it will happen in Hebrew, though I imagine it might happen in other languages first, but there is a chance it will happen in Hebrew. In Yiddish, literally the only way is if I don't have the time at the moment right now, so if someone wants to take it on and do it, and will probably turn it into a PDF and put it online, I would be more than happy to make that happen. And I think it would be extremely powerful.
Yeah.
I actually did. It's very interesting because, and I mentioned in the book also a website that I did some reading on when I started leaving, called Daf Emet, which is written by an Israeli former rabbi. And I translated a lot of his articles into Yiddish, which is, part of them were a hit. There's something called The Letter to My Rabbi. Have you read that? It's very popular. It was written by someone who grew up ultra-Orthodox and left. It's a very powerful letter. It was originally written in Hebrew and then translated to English. And then a few friends and I translated it into Yiddish. And it's like 80 pages long, almost like a book. And it was very popular. So I know while there isn't going to be a store in Williamsburg, maybe in North Williamsburg, but not in South Williamsburg where the Hasidic people live, there isn't going to be a store that's going to sell it. It will be online, and there will be both physical and PDF versions, hopefully. And I'm sure that there will be, I believe, a few thousand Hasidic people who will read it if we translate it into Yiddish. But for now, there's no fun to it. And it's not like we're going to make a lot of money, like selling it.
Right. But it might have influence. Anyway, it's good food for thought.
Yeah. Again, I'm putting it out there. If someone wants to fund it, please come talk to me.
We're about to open up for questions from you, but let me just ask one more. We have not exclusively parents in the audience, but we have a lot of parents in the audience, and we are in a Jewish day school. And you talked a little bit before, Abby, about responsibility of parents. So if you have any, and we heard from a woman earlier about why she was here, because she has a child who's questioning gender nonconforming. And I just wonder if there's advice that you would give to all the parents who are out here, prospective parents, about raising their kids in a way that is more accepting. If you were their kid, what would you want?
So first I want to say that thank you for being here, specifically for parents that affect their kids. Because so much, I mean, I think for the community as a whole, for the day school and for all the other 10 co-sponsoring organizations, because what I've learned, it's not just the fact that this is an event and it's not just the people that are here. Because also for the people, first of all, the people didn't make it, because based on the amount of people who signed up, I got a feeling that about half of them didn't actually make it here. But these people were thinking about it, but also these communities. I'm going to assume that some of you are going to go back to your communities or talk to friends and you can mention this event. And if you weren't planning on, please do. Not because, you don't even have to mention my name, and I mean that, but simply because when a community does an event like that, it already sends a really strong and powerful message. So that is just the first part. But a few, I think, very important things that parents have to know. And I think first and foremost, in whichever way that means, it's not your fault. Which I think is a very important message. And I had that with my mom. She blamed herself when and it was before it even came out, when I stopped being religious. And she blamed herself, which was kind of sad to me. First of all, I mean, I didn't want to give her the credit, so to speak, for it. I think it was me asking questions and doing things. So whatever, I'm not gonna, but also, not just that part, she legitimately blamed herself, and whatever, there was the story, something about the tithes, that you can buy the book and read it. Another part that didn't make it into the book, so there's, on my mom's side of the family, kind of like, we have Twersky. My mom comes from a family called Baal Shem Tov, which is also a very big Polish Hasidic dynasty. And kind of the patriarch, the father of her, like, she's a direct descendant of, he was fighting back against enlightenment that became popular during his time. And one of the things, there's a tale in the family, I don't know if it's true or not, that he promised his granddaughters and great-granddaughters until the end of time, he said, if they promised him 3 changes. They promised him they're never going to sit in the sukkah. All you know what a sukkah is? Yeah. So they're never going to sit in the sukkah.
Not everybody knows.
Okay, for those that don't know what a sukkah is, it's a boot, literally like a tent, but usually made out of panels, and it has to be covered by something natural, either bamboo or grass or leaves. And there's a holiday called the Holiday Festival of Sukkot, of boots, translated, but it feels weird to say that. And it follows the high holiday, so it follows Yom Kippur during the kind of the month where whoever made the Jewish calendar just decided to take all holidays and put them into 1 month. But yeah, so it's, I don't know what's the change, but I was talking about Sukkot. Oh yeah. They weren't, and the same thing, another thing on Sukkot is that you take like palm trees and citrus fruit and citrons, not citrus fruit, and you shave them, so they also promise the story goes that not to make a bracha on them, very much not to shake them, and not to fast. Any fast is other than Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, which was also something about being able to be strong and have kids. He promises them that they're going to have good kids. So on my mom's side of the family, women never sit in the sukkah. They just don't. My dad's side of the family, my grandmother, I think, doesn't drink water outside of the sukkah. Like, she eats in the sukkah a lot. And my dad, when my parents got married, my dad, he promised them that if they do that, their kids are going to be, like, very religious and very devoted. And when my parents got married, my dad begged my mom that at least the first night, which is when it's biblical, it's considered very big, she should at least eat a bit in the sukkah. And she agreed for most of my life, until I left. Because that's, which is so, it's like the superstitious thing that, I feel like that should be like the title of something, like I went off the deck because my mom ate in the sukkah. Which sounds weird almost. But I think these were all just examples of feeling guilty. But I've had these conversations with parents. I do talk with a lot of parents. I used to teach Hebrew school for 4 years. I worked at Jewish camps, and it's a conversation that comes up a lot. And I think that is first a very important thing because it also affects the children. First of all, it's not your fault, because it isn't, but also there's nothing wrong about it. It's not about being your fault. I would say, good for you. You raised a child that feels comfortable enough and proud enough of themselves to come up to you and talk to you. So amazing. Now, I think if you, and you probably can answer that even better than I can, because I only know it, I am also a parent, I know from my experience, and I can also tell about what I would love my parents would have done. but I think it's something that parents who have had that probably know even better. I think one of the most important things is listen. Sit down and be like, not to be like, oh, I still love you, but rather, we love you no matter what, and we want to know. We want to know what's happening with you, and we want to celebrate that. Or as I said before, not we still love you, but that's amazing, let's go and have a party. But really listen to the children. Offering support, both emotionally, but also resources, logistically. And I don't expect every parent, though maybe, I don't know, when we figured out a way to actually educate, like to have actual parenting classes, which is not a requirement yet when you have kids, but maybe that should be a thing, that we should educate parents to know what to do. But they are in every major city in North America today, and in Israel, and so many other places. There is an LGBTQ center that has experience, that has resources. Take your children to, first of all, I'm a huge fan of therapy, because as we all know, the only people who don't go to therapy are the people who need it most. It's a reality, unfortunately. But I specifically for LGBTQ people, because it's not easy. We still live in a society, as much as we think we have progressed so much, we still live in a society where it's not the default. We still live in a society that if you are gay, you are going to be that gay person, you're going to be that lesbian person, and if you get married, it's going to be a lesbian wedding, regardless of how common it might become. So it is important to get that support. Support groups are one of probably the single most important things that I've ever found, both personally and with other people. And a lot of, actually most LGBTQ centers will have a huge, and whatever, I'm assuming that they were talking about teenagers, though they could also be in the 20s, 30s, or they could be 90s. So it's not always teenagers, but specifically with youth, taking them and encouraging them to be part of LGBTQ youth support groups are extremely important, both to get the support, but also to feel like they belong, to feel like we're part of the community. And it's like, for me even, and until today sometimes, as much as I would say that I kind of like what we call like passing, which is this like stereotypical thing of, oh, you look like a woman, or like you look like a man, or you can be lesbian, but you don't have to look lesbian. Like when you pass, maybe it's sometimes easier to be part of the community, but the reality is, I never feel, until today, like to be able to really just be and talk about which movies I like instead of talking about my identity. It's sometimes only able to do that in LGBTQ specific community. So that is also really important. And these are just for start. There's so much more. But
Thank you. We're going to open it up to questions
great. So
from
before
you.
we do that,
You're good.
okay, great. Anyone in the room identifies as straight who wants to come up and be my sacrificial lamb? I'm not actually going to sacrifice you, don't worry. But I have some questions for you. Anyone who wants to do that? Ideally, someone who really identifies as straight. Like, don't come up here and then be like, oh, maybe I'm not. Yeah. Here. I just raise your mic. Okay. Hi, I'm Abby. What's your name?
I'm Ruth.
Great meeting you, Ruth. What's your sexuality?
Sexuality. I am attracted to my dude.
Are you sure about that?
I'm really into my dude.
Maybe you just haven't met the right girl yet.
I've met girls.
Oh, how old were you when you realized you were straight?
How was I?
Were your parents okay when you came out to them?
I'm straight. They like my dude.
Okay, but it's like, and like, how does it work? Like, how do you actually do it? Thank you so much. But I think you all got the point. It sounds ridiculous sometimes, and also I don't want anyone to get the wrong message. Like, don't go off and start asking every person that these questions. And what I'm trying to tell you is to never ask questions like these. However, and so usually also when people want to know, oh, which kind of questions can I ask? So there's two rules. Usually if you don't know if you can ask something, you probably can, so don't. But also, think on a more serious level, think if you would ask that question. You meet a lesbian, think if you would, before you can ask something, would you ask that question from a straight woman? Would you ask that question from a cisgender person, someone who is not trans? And it's not just about LGBTQ issues. I think the same goes for immigrants, the same goes for race, the same goes for people with different socioeconomic status. It goes for everything. I sometimes say, think if you would ask that from an Anglo-Saxon, white, Protestant, straight, middle-class man. Because then I like to check off all the boxes. Think if, before you ask them. However, tonight, And as part of the work that I do, I'm putting myself out there. And you could literally ask me anything. So even these questions that you shouldn't usually ask, you are allowed to ask it. And I really mean this because I think these conversations need to be had, but only from people who consent to having these questions asked from them, which is what I'm doing right now. But also, I don't have to answer everything. And I mean that in a nice way. I don't have a lot of headlines, but I do have a few. There's a few things that I don't want to talk about. So please, if I tell you that something I don't want to talk about, don't get insulted though. It's nothing personal, which is why I'm telling you right now. There's a few things that I don't like to talk about. Other than that, please ask away.
So we have traveling mics here. Somebody moving around with mics?
If there are not enough questions, I can talk for 2 more hours. So.
Go to the back. I'll come back to you. If you can introduce yourself, if you're comfortable.
And pronouns, which are like, I use she, her pronouns. So like, say your name.
Please, you're putting pressure on me.
I'm sorry.
Eileen Dunn, and you can address me as she, her,
Right.
you know. I was just curious whether your sort of stopping being religious was what propelled you or helped you come out as trans, or the other way around, or was it more simultaneous?
Again, in the book you can read a lot more about that, but to me they were kind of 2 separate journeys that were obviously influenced by each other, and in a very direct way, my struggle with gender, which wasn't really struggling, I knew how I identified since a really young age, but rather struggling on how to deal with that, is what caused me to start asking certain questions when I was really young, like preteens and teenage years, that most people in the Hasidic community don't ask. But by the time I left, a lot of it was for religious reasons. It was, again, there was always like triggers of identity triggers that ended up like leading also into making it harder to stay within a religious practice when I don't believe in it. But at the core of it, they were 2 journeys that like, it's like regardless of my gender identity, with everything that I knew and whatever I was with my beliefs, I would have left anyway. And regardless of my beliefs, I identified as trans. And I mean, the one thing that is just realistically a fact was that I couldn't transition to the community. That's a reality right now, which is simply impossible. It's not a question of are they going to accept you. It's simply impossible. You can't be part of that community and do that. And people ask me a lot, like, if they hypothetically become more accepting, which I hope they will one day, which would be amazing and great, and I hope so, and it will probably help me to talk to my family again, but my cultural and spiritual and religious practices wouldn't become Hasidic again, even if they fully support me. Let me actually rephrase that. I think they are very Hasidic. They wouldn't be Ultra-Orthodox, which is a whole in-depth different conversation. I still very much like Hasidic.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nicole, she and her. My question is, what was the hardest thing to leave behind?
Good one. And the truth is, people ask me a lot like, oh, like what do you miss of the Hasidic community? What do you miss of your background? And I don't miss a lot, simply because if I want something, I do it. Which has very much been my approach. Whatever that includes certain parts of Shabbat, or of holidays, or the food. You can follow me on Instagram and you will see it. I love my challah and the gefilte fish and the cholent and the greasy food that people I think who didn't grow up Hasidic can't look at, but I still love it. I don't miss it necessarily. And I think it took me a while, but I've very much gotten to a point where I'm very engaged in Jewish life in my own way, and it helps me hold on the parts that I want to, and that is beautiful. The only part that I really miss is my family, because that is something that it's kind of impossible to replace. I mean, though, the more, and I was saying that jokingly before, but like the more I start thinking, oh, I don't have any family, the more I find family, like Fay, or like other, which sometimes are not that close, but I found actually a whole branch of like 2nd and 3rd cousins who are Israelis, who are totally like secular and whatever, who I became really close with, but I didn't know they existed until a year ago, because apparently in my family, cutting off family members that are not religious is a tradition going back to so like they knew that we exist, but I didn't know that they exist. So I do have family and that I'm very close with, that I love, but my parents and my immediate family, that is something that I don't think can really be replaced. So that is definitely something that I miss. But in general, and I'm talking of, I really believe in that mentality of looking at a background and be like, there are things that I like, things that I don't, and holding on to the things that you like, and knowing that that's not just okay, but that is beautiful. I believe in that so much, I actually went and created this thing called Sacred Space, which for now, we meet once a month at a wing in New York City, where we had, the idea of it came out from a friend of mine, and my friend who grew up in a very fundamentalist Mormon community and was excommunicated because she dared to start an organization called Ordained Woman, trying to get women ordained. And for the sin of that, she went through an actual trial, which is a bit more intense than what I went through, because the Mormons actually have trials where they excommunicate you. But then we started this thing called Sacred Space, which the idea of it is bring as much of your background as you want and celebrate that and share that with everyone else, and let go of the rest and know that that is not just okay, but that is beautiful.
One in the back, and then I'm going to come to you in the front, so you can't see her.
Hi, my name is Dvoida. I use she, her pronouns. And
Hey,
I'm
Dvoida?
Dvoida.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Footsteps member from New York
Oh,
City.
hi!
And
Okay, can I just stop for a second and say what Footsteps is?
please.
Yeah, so Footsteps is a legitimately life-saving organization, not just metaphorically, but literally, at least it was for me, that is helping people who are leaving the Ultra-Orthodox community. Contrary to what some Hasidic people try to say, they do not push people to leave, but rather just help people who are leaving anyway. But they help people with, people who grow up, and specifically in the Hasidic community, don't know anything about the world outside. And I needed help on fashion, on how to go shopping, on making friends, on learning English, getting an education, and they help with so much of these. And I actually think, I'm going to let you talk about that in the end.
Yeah,
I
yes.
might push it back to you, but yeah, but I'll talk about it at the end.
Okay,
You know,
there's going to be an
it's fine.
opportunity to support
Yeah.
also at the end, and Hillary's going to talk more about it. So continue.
I was just wondering, how do you balance, the hurt that your community has given to you with your desire to maybe celebrate Judaism? And how do you maintain like a healthy relationship between these two contrasting issues?
That is one of the most controversial conversations that we have at Footsteps all the time, and they are like whenever they have events, and that's a legitimate thing where they are people and they want to serve people who do want to keep kosher. They are people who come who are either who left Ultra-Orthodoxy but could still be Orthodox, could be observant in their own levels. They have staff members that are legitimately Orthodox, and they want to, but then there are people who legitimately get triggered by kosher food. It's a real thing. There's something that where I'm not post-GAF traumatic disorder, which is a real thing. It's like when people grow up and God is that like boogeyman in the sky, and that religion and the community, there is a lot of hurt. As I've said, like I got hurt by the community a lot, and I think for me what was really helpful were two main things, which not everyone could have, where first I had a 2-year period where I went totally whoops, and I was like, didn't do anything, didn't want to have anything to do. Like, I did some intense things like doing like an impromptu road trip to Vegas one Friday night, and like doing a Yom Kippur camping trip where the entire menu was made out of pork, and like stuff like that. I did a lot of it, and I think that really, and I think that was actually healthy. It was like really helped me get over it. And then in a twisted way, and what I like to call a silver lining, the reality that my family doesn't talk to me for the last 4 years, which is, most of it is very negative, but one of the positive things that I like to focus on is that I don't have to fight with them. One of the things, and you probably know that a lot, one of the things that happens at Fritz Supply is people who, they have left, but they still have to, like, their family still drives them insane on the smallest things. And the reality that I don't have to go through, that also kind of helps me a lot. But I think for me, it was having that period of being no. Then kind of like once I felt more comfortable with myself and being comfortable specifically with the idea that we grow up, and you probably know that, with the very black and white. There's like, you're either ultra-Orthodox or you're secular, which by the way, everyone who's not ultra-Orthodox, like, I don't think I really knew the difference between modern Orthodox and Reform. Like, there was just all these like modern and liberal Jews who are terrible, terrible people. And who are to some extent by the Ultra-Orthodox community, they consider more dangerous than non-Jews to some extent. Like I went to a school. My family wasn't necessarily Satmar, which is a Hasidic sect that is very anti-Zionist, but the school that I went to was very much affiliated with them, and we were literally told that Zionists are worse than Nazis. Wow. Because Nazis only wanted to kill our bodies, and Zionists kill our souls, which is a very similar approach that they have to secular Jews, that you are more dangerous. So, but I think that once I was able to like get over that mentality, both that I got from books and from friends. And I started, for me, another part was a bit nostalgia. Like a lot of the things that I do, and like I like Friday Night Candles every week, and then I can go watch a movie, but I do that. And which to a lot, so many, like the people that are in my life now, and the community that I'm part of now, that's, no one even blinks an eye to that, it's normal. But for me to be able to realize to do that I can do that, and to come to a place where I'm like, and I get that specifically from other like footsteps, other people who grew up religious, they're like, why are you doing that? You're just like nostalgia, you can't get over it. And I'm like, yes, but why would I? Like, why do I have to get over celebrating holidays when I want to do them in my own way? So I think that is, a very short answer is being able to be like, I can do it in my own way, and that is not just okay, but that is beautiful. And if you think it doesn't make any sense for someone else, I don't live for someone else, I live for me.
I want to give you this mic again. I promise to give it back.
I'm from Mrs. Stein. My name is Fatin Waxelman. May I ask 2 questions? Is it too greedy?
I'll forgive you.
So my first question, growing up in Indonesia,
Sorry, I'm just really,
yeah.
it's really warm in here.
So I grew up in Indonesia. This is my 6 years living in the state. I had a lot of gay friends, but homosexuality, LGBTQ was never really talked widely. It was, always hidden. Most of my gay friends married straight women just because they cannot handle coming out to their family.
Sounds very familiar.
Right, and now even though I am very familiar with the life of homosexual and lesbian people, but I feel that your words strike me being tolerant. Am I being tolerant, or am I really being understanding? And like how do I know this for sure? And if I am being tolerant, what is your advice that is practical for most people to do? Like, do you really want to be perceived difference? Do you want us to see you as any other woman next to you? Is that what your ultimate, goal is? That was my first question.
How about I answer this first?
That was a lot of questions.
How about I answer this? I think this question over.
We have one other question over here when.
Okay, can I
There's
just
quite a few.
tell me if I got it wrong? But from what I understand, your question is mostly like 2 main parts, which is first of like, how do we know for ourselves, like, and assuming you are not like, you're not gay, and like, how do you know for yourself that you're doing well? And if not, like, what could we do? Like, how could we open ourselves up more? So I personally found that like, and it's like how, also you want to like how to really act with people, and I think that question comes up a lot with race also. And for example, I always say, and it's a reality, I don't have to say it, particularly people of color that say it, but the reality is that most people say they're colorblind and they don't see color are usually the biggest racists. It doesn't work like that. So in other words, I don't want to live in a community, which is why I was saying I don't want to live in a community where when you come out, everyone is just like, oh, cool, amazing, moving on. I want to live in a community where when you come out, everyone is like, amazing, let's go and have a party. But in other words, what I'm saying, I want it to be celebrated just like we have any other identity or any other parts of ourselves. Like, I see it to some extent, I'm not saying it's an art, it's not performative, but to imagine someone who's an artist, right? You want to be treated, you want to be part of the community, but you also want people to celebrate that part of yourself. So, on average, here's the thing. So first of all, you meet someone, that shouldn't be the first question. If you do meet someone who is LGBTQ, yeah, definitely in the beginning, just talk to people and be like normal. Treat trans women like every other woman, treat trans men like treat people normally. But then I think it is important, specifically in the world we live today, but also it is a part of ourselves. It's just like let's put it this way. When there's a straight wedding, okay, no one is asking, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't talk about it. We're not gonna talk about the fact that you're getting married. It's just gonna have you be part of the community. We don't usually ask these questions because everyone is like, no, this is a really important part of what you are. Now you're getting married, you're starting a family. It's cool, it's amazing, let's celebrate that. That is the kind of reaction. I'm like, you're lesbian, you're gay, you're trans, that's cool, that's amazing, that's a part of you, but we treat you just like everyone else. Does that make sense? And then in terms of like the easiest way that I found to really like open ourselves up more is by listening to stories, both from whatever it's books or online. There's thankfully by now some bad ones, but there's some really good like online videos and stuff like that you can educate yourself more, and also getting to know people. It's the single most effective tool for people that studies have shown for people to become more open and accepting and celebrating of LGBTQ people. It's getting to know them.
I'm going to tell a 30-second story, and then we're going to take one question from this side of the room.
Okay.
The 30-second story is that I was in a professional conversation a couple of weeks ago with a guy who, for some reason, I thought was a gay guy. And we were in conversation, and you know, I'm a lesbian parent, and I thought, here he is a gay parent, and so he was talking about his kid, and I said, so how did you have?
You sound like
how did
every
you
straight people think that everyone is straight. You just think everyone is gay.
So that's what Joe says. I said, how did you have your kid? He says, what? And I said, you know, how did you have your kid, your baby? And he said, what, again? And again, a third time, I said, so Eli, you know, how did you have, and he said, oh, my wife got pregnant. And I was so embarrassed. I mean, I wasn't embarrassed, it was like one of those moments.
I like it. This is like twisted. People always add that from gay people.
I know, that's why I decided to share that story.
It's like when people ask me about my like genitals, which you would be shocked. I mean, I guess not shocked, but as trans people get that a lot, and I always tell people, listen, unless I'm gonna date you or you're my doctor, it's none of your business. But then I'm starting to think maybe we should just twist it around and start asking everyone else. I ask her like, how do you have sex? Like, what are your genitals like?
Yeah, that was an unintended, exactly that. Let's take a question from this side of the room, and then I think we're going to begin to wrap up. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Joan. Joan Mielfelder. I'm a she. And I have a very non-intellectual, philosophical question. When you're born as a boy, how much effort does it take on your part, and how consuming is it for you to be a woman, to look like a woman, to dress like a woman, to have woman mannerisms? I mean, I'm just curious because I don't know how you do it.
Okay.
You were born as a boy, but now you look like a woman.
So I'm not gonna, this is one of the things that I actually don't talk a lot about, and I'm not gonna go into it in detail. There is a lot of information online. I will say one very important thing about this, where there's no one size fits all. Every person is different. I was relatively always feminine. I always sucked at trying to be a guy or at male fashion, or I could never do it. And people, whatever, thought that I was gay for a long time, which is not necessarily wrong, but that's not the point. People thought that I just could never. So personally, that was just me, but every trans person has their own experience. And I prefer not to talk about my physical parts of transition in detail. There's a lot of information online. There are trans women who make videos online who feel very comfortable to talk about it, and there's a lot that can be found both on YouTube and other places. I would be very careful from getting these kind of information from anyone who isn't trans or from someone who isn't a professional, because just people who talk tend not to know what they're talking about, but there are a lot of trans people who talk about it, and there's a lot of information to be found online.
Another question from this side of the room? Do we have another? I feel like I was
Is that a very quiet side of the room?
Okay.
Go ahead.
You seem very adamant about not talking
Wait, we're
about
going to bring you a mic so everybody can hear you.
Ezzy, he, and
What's your name?
Ezzy. You seem very adamant about not talking about your father, and are you comfortable with explaining why that is?
A bit. So, growing up, I had a very positive experience with my father most of the time. I think I mostly had a close relationship with my mom, but it's hard to say. I had a close relationship with both of them. But the older I got, the more I started realizing that as far as Hasidic people go, my dad is really open-minded, to an extent. He is a Hasidic rabbi. When I was growing up, he was mostly teaching. He was teaching at Yeshiva. He was teaching Jewish law, teaching halacha. And then he started working, now he works at Yeshiva for like a Hasidic version of Teens at Risk, which usually just means cell phones and talking to girls, not like whatever, but like Hasidic version of Teens at Risk and whatever that means. He also does marriage counseling, he is a paid public speaker, does a lot, he speaks on several kind of like Hasidic version of radio, which is more like they have like hotlines and whatever. He by now has his own, he's a rabbi of an actual physical like synagogue. He teaches daily classes. Well, he's very out there, but specifically the part where he's relatively open-minded is he works with Teens at Risk, and he has some of his like students, so to speak, are people who are on the internet all the time, and he has himself internet at work, which is not a given, specifically not for Hasidic rabbis, where he grew up, and he knows a lot, and I had conversations with him that made me sometimes question what he really believes in. And let's put it this way, for short, when I think about it right now, my mom's biggest issue with me right now is that she sometimes legitimately believes I'm going to hell. Now, it's sad to some extent, but my mom really, I learned a lot, and I actually learned it from my parents, to really respect people who live according to their beliefs. I might vehemently disagree with you sometimes, but there's a certain respect to be had for people who really live to their beliefs. And for my mom, I can definitely tell that. My dad's issue with me right now is, what are people going to say? How is it going to reflect on him? Rather than a legitimate belief. I tend to have a lot less respect for that. But yeah, and in general, I don't know. I sometimes think that he's a very solid believer in what he says. Sometimes I think he doesn't believe anything that he says, which is where I have a big struggle with it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Should we take more from that side, or?
We'll go close to that side. You could go, and then we'll go back to that side.
Okay. My question might be more mundane, but we bought your book, but I haven't
No right
read
or
it.
wrong.
And I'm wondering, you were a rabbi, and I wonder, number one, are you still a rabbi, and how has that changed? And the second, or more important question to me is, how has these changes in your way of living in your life affected your outlook on Torah and on God? And
did you say this is a mundane question? I legitimately have over 40 source sheets online that grapple with some of these questions. So it's very far from mundane. Sorry, did you finish your question? Did I cut you off?
It's a lot of questions.
No, but Dan, sorry, can you like rephrase them very quickly? I just want to make sure I got them right. One sentence.
would you share with me your relationship with God and community?
Oh, okay, yeah. So here's the thing, like, when I think about being a rabbi, so like, one of the biggest reasons why I don't use that title now and why I sometimes feel hesitant, so the reality is that in the Hasidic community, I was titled rabbi, like I legitimately had, like I got like this letter from a rabbi, which is called a dayan, which is like an act of someone against law, which is saying that, yeah, you are allowed to answer questions that people ask halachic questions. I was teaching at a yeshiva, kind of similar to what my dad was doing, and so on. But at the same time, so like I finished kind of like I did, which is like, there's no rabbinical school in the Hasidic world. I mean, there is something close to that for married students that I was gonna do at some point, but just on the laws of one very specific part of Jewish law that focuses on like property and business law, which is kind of the part where there's some, it's like the part of Jewish law where until today that people can actually make a lot of money. Like I have an uncle who became really successful in being like a rabbinical judge on business issues and so on. But and personally, like in order to be considered a rabbi in the sense, but there's all different kind of rabbis. They are some people who are legitimate rabbis in the sense that they lead synagogues who don't have a traditional ordination, but they pretty much are rabbis. So like, I do have the traditional ordination in the sense of the like studies and 5 years of intense studying, and then we do oral exams that I did a total of probably 30 hours, not in one, split up. And then, but then there's another part which is called shimush, which is kind of these like equivalency of internships, I guess, but actual practicing rabbis, which I never finished. And also, I think another big part is like in most rabbinical schools today, when people think about rabbis, which is everyone outside of the Ultra-Orthodox world, rabbis also get chaplaincy and clergy training, which the Hasidic community doesn't really do, which is another thing. So that's kind of the rabbinical part. So my relationship with the Torah, specifically with the Bible in a little sense, went from, this is all, literally every story happened exactly as it's told. the world is 5,780 years old, and this is how everything happened, to being, no, this is definitely not how it happened, and the Bible was written by people, and therefore it's all bullshit, to coming back and being, these are all stories that were written down by our people. These were all stories that, some of them might have actually happened, some of them are folk tales, some of them are myths, and some of them, I actually believe that a lot of stories in the Bible, just my personal, were never meant to be taken on face value the way Ultra-Orthodox people look on it today. And I see it today, most importantly to me, I see it as a cultural and spiritual thing of something that our people for 3,000 years have been grappling with, have been talking about it. It's at the end of the day, it's a human, it tells so much, as the saying go, which actually I think it's Hasidic, but I'm not sure who actually said that, which is like the Bible is not about God's relationship with humanity, but rather about humanity's relationship with God, which is like how us figuring out what it means to be alive. And but I've gotten the question more than once, like, do you believe in God? And I always tell people, define belief, define God, and we'll talk. And then I had once where someone told me, this is a yes or no question, do you believe in God? And I'm like, if your God is yes or no, then no, I'm a total atheist. And to some extent, if you look at the philosophical versions, yes, I'm a total atheist. But then other times, if you want to talk about God, sometimes even in the sense the way Hasidic rabbis talk about God, like some Hasidic teachings, they talk about God, which by philosophical definition is atheism. Like, there's Hasidic people talk about this fact that everything is God. Not everything has a part of God, but everything is God. Which also by definition means that there isn't sorry if I'm going to get really annoying to a lot of other people, but something that would be called philosophically a dualism, which is like a theistic God usually, in monotheistic religion is this concept where there's God and there's humanity, there's God and everything else. And I'm not talking here about good and evil, that's a whole other conversation. By definition, if you think that everything that exists is God, which means that the sum total of existence is God, then there isn't a God in the monotheistic, like, conventional sense of God. Which means by definition that by believing in that, philosophically you would be considered an atheist. Or like there's a Hasidic story that,
Or a Buddhist.
yeah, which are again from a philosophical, let's say I took some academic philosophy classes, and if you want to like put an academic definition of believe and disbelief or believe, theism and atheism, that is considered atheism. Which again, labels are useless, like most of the time. I always tell labels are meant for shelves that you put in a closet, and closets are not made for people. But that is how it usually goes. But point being, like, one final thing I want to say about that, and sorry, I'm talking fast right now because I feel like only a few people care. So, but I love to talk about these things. But there's the story of someone coming to a Hasidic Rabbi, I don't remember the exact details of it, saying that, hey Rabbi, I became an atheist. He's like, oh really? Who is that God that you don't believe in? He's like, what do you mean? The God who's going to punish me if I don't do X, Y, and Z, the God who's going to send me to hell, and the God who hates me, and the God... And he's like, oh, that God? I don't believe in that God either. which is, I guess the short answer is, this is, I think, a more complex question than yes and no. Though I did grow up with it. Let's put it this way. The God I grew up in, I'm a total atheist. Does that help your question? Answer?
You know what? That is going to be a perfect conclusion to our talk. No, nothing to. That is actually a perfect conclusion to our interactive part of our question and answer with you, Abby. I know there are a lot more questions. I still owe you a question, and there are more questions here. Abby's going to be around
I'm disappearing right now.
for a little bit. There are books that people want to buy books, and she'll also be around to sign some books as well. We're going to. Hillary is going to. Hillary, who was David gave her an accolade, but who was really amazing in getting this all organized and scheduled.
Hillary is also the person in the room that I've known for the longest. I love you all, but she is my only real friend. Okay, maybe a few other people in the audience. Sorry, Laura. Okay, now that we're only real. I've known her the longest. So, yeah.
Hillary is going to share some information about Footsteps and...
Is this working?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we can hear you.
This is going to slightly blind you, and I'm sorry about it, but,
No.
but hang on.
Does this have internet connection?
Speak up, Hill.
Oh,
Does this have an internet connection?
This has an internet connection, but I'm not going to let you
I was going to pull up
take...
the support site.
Okay, one second.
Okay,
I have a
you
question that I want to ask Abby, and kind of risk making this interactive again. as we all do, right? We seem to all be from the same. First of all, Abby, it's so good to see you again, and I'm so glad you could be here, and I'm so grateful for everyone who came and for everyone who helped pull this together. There's too many people to count. You make me miss home.
Aww.
But that's okay, because I'll be okay. Not about me. So I want you to tell me, I know that there's a lot to Hasidism and there's different sects and whatnot, but I want you to just really quickly talk about how hard it is to leave. Because I think I want to kind of get at that and then and then be able to talk about footsteps in relationship to that. Otherwise,
Great.
I think it kind of
Great,
a little.
okay, so let me do that very quickly actually.
Thank you.
Again, talking with all of you. But think of the 90s. Think of culture. Anything you knew. Give me some examples. What was a cultural thing of the 90s?
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld, what?
Dancing.
What? Anyone else? Give me anything cultural thing from the 90s, huh? Oh, not politics.
Nirvana.
Yeah.
CD players.
Yeah. Okay. The reason why I'm asking you this is because all of these things that were mentioned, not in the book, when we do follow politics, were not forbidden things. Take Seinfeld, which might have been the most Jewish show, at least in the 90s or ever. It wasn't that I was aware that there was this TV show out there that I wasn't allowed to listen to. I think the US doesn't lack fundamentalist religious communities. The part where specifically the Ultra-Orthodox community really stands out, and it's not specifically the way I grew up, there are some differences. I also want to say one thing because that comes up a lot, because people tend to know when they think about Hasidic Jews, a lot of people know Chabad. So I'm not saying that in a good or negative or positive, but I'm not talking about Chabad at all. They're very different than the way I grew up. They're very different than the rest of the Hasidic world, so not talking about that. But the way I grew up, these were not forbidden things. These are things that I didn't know existed. I didn't know about Thanksgiving. I didn't know about Halloween. I mean, I knew about it. There's one night in the fall when the Goyim, which is just a reference to everyone who's not Ultra-Orthodox, throw eggs at people, but without any context. There is legitimately no... Growing up there doesn't just mean growing up with certain restrictions. It's living in a different continent. It's not speaking the language. Me freaking out the first time I walked into a Starbucks, not knowing how to order, how to chew anything. Never figuring out the things that everyone seems to know. Like, I went to school, and when I went to college, which was literally 4 years after I left, there was these constant references that no one taught to think that there might be people. And I went to a school where there was a lot of international students. And I realized that I know less about American culture than the international students. And so on, and I can go on. Like, it's growing up in a community where you're not just an immigrant, you live in the 18th century to some extent. You don't know anything. It's not just the family struggle, it's a struggle of simply being able to live. It's a struggle of knowing how to be a person in society, how to go shopping, how to learn everything. Anything that you can think of. That is the struggle.
And
Do you want to
footsteps?
continue?
Yeah, I want to continue. Sure. I think there's Abby and I had a chance to get to know each other, and I'm proud to call you a friend. And so we worked together in Camp Ramah Day Camp in Nyack in the Teva Shack, where we sang to children and taught them about nature, even though I don't really know.
A very tiny crayfish.
Yeah, little right. But all right, I like this one better. I don't know. So what I want to say is that this is the second time that I've had the pleasure of doing a speaking or having Abby speak, and the first time was in New York, where there were members, lots of members of Footsteps who came to listen, and I had a chance to get to know them as well, I feel really, I felt really strongly about Footsteps, but I'm happy that Abby chose Footsteps to be the organization that she would like to do some fundraising for. If you feel that you want to give, we have a URL established, which will be really easy for you to give to through Hausner, and then we will give it to Footsteps.
Footsteps is an organization that helps people live self-actualize. Am I saying that?
It helps people live. That's not a metaphor. It helps people live,
I mean,
literally.
everything from, as Abby's saying, learning how to match clothing, learning how to speak English, getting support and help, leaving, I can't, I Reform synagogue, New York Jew,
It's
but
like from
everything, and leaving.
learning how to write a resume, learning how to
So leaving is not easy, and people need support. And so, if you would like, you can donate here. What I also want to say is Abby is going to be here at this table. There are books for sale in the hallway out here, and she'll be here for a conversation and book signing. And Fay, I'm going to let you
wrap it up.
Wrap
Okay.
it up.
So I'm hoping, Hillary, also that you will send out this link because people won't find it otherwise.
Yep.
And so as a follow-up, people can also donate. Really just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming out on a rainy, kind of gloomy evening. And mostly thank you to you, Abby, for being here, for sharing your story. And for now, I know I have another long-lost cousin. So please join me in welcoming.
Also, I give thank you to obviously Hillary. I love you so much, and it's amazing, and Faye, and everyone here. But I also, if she's gonna allow me, I don't know if she will.
Yes, she will.
No, I'm not allowed to. I'm gonna not listen to you. I've had enough of a year long listening to you, but not this book wouldn't like. I always tell people I've had the pleasure of working professionally with people who are beyond professionals. I think there are certain I had that with my agent, and I specifically had it with my editor. I think there's certain expectations that people have. There's like professional things, yes, but then there's people going beyond that. And this is the first time we're doing a book event where she's actually here. I'm not going to point her out because she's totally going to kill me if I do that. But I am extremely grateful. And there were some parts during this journey that where I was about to give up, literally. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without her. So